This work, whether it's your brand, story, beliefs, or business, is about unbecoming who you were told to be and remembering who the fuck you actually are. It is about reclaiming your voice, standing in your mana power, and building a life rooted in your whakapapa, the story of how you belong to everything which came before you and that will come after you. We are not simply building brands here. We are breaking inherited patterns and building generations. If that's the kind of work that you are seeking, follow the podcast so you do not miss what comes next. You are with Lilia Tarawa on Brand Breaker. Thank you very much for being here. Kia ora. It is a rainy, cold day here in Christchurch, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and today we are going to dive right into it. We are going to get deep in the mindset work, so let's get rolling. Look, you already know you're capable of more. That's the frustrating part. You look at your life, your business, your brand, and you're so grateful for how far you've come, but you're thinking, I should be further along than this. And you're right. You've invested, you've done the training, you've sharpened your skills, you work incredibly hard, and you're intelligent, but something still feels stuck. So you tell yourself you just need to learn more. Another strategy, another certification, another tactic. You do know you're meant to be for far more than this level, don't you? But what if the problem isn't what you know? Because if you misdiagnose the problem, you will waste years solving the wrong thing and still not achieving the results you want. Because when you're ambitious and capable and still not where you want to be, it messes with your head. You know you should be operating at a higher level. You know you have more in you. And I believe that you do. And when that gap stays there longer than you expect, you start questioning yourself. You start wondering, what am I missing? Is it my strategy? Is it my messaging? Do I need another skill? Am I just not cut out for this? Maybe I overestimated myself. Maybe this is just as far as I'll ever go. Have you ever thought that? Most of us have. So you do what most ambitious people do. You work harder. You tweak things. You refine. You analyze. You look at other leaders who seem to be growing effortlessly. And you try to reverse engineer what they're doing differently. And slowly, without even noticing, you start believing the problem must be something you don't have yet. And once you believe that, you start chasing it. You start waiting to feel more ready, waiting to feel more confident, waiting for some kind of proof that you belong at the level you want to play at. You've delayed at least a decision once because you didn't feel fully ready, right? So have I. And you lose years doing that, years trying to fix something that was never the real problem in the first place. So for years, even while I was running a successful 7-figure business, I was still behaving like a woman who needed permission. On paper, I looked capable. I had the title, I had shares in a business, I had revenue coming in, I was leading people twice my age. But internally, I was bending over backwards to please everyone around me instead of leading. You know the difference, don't you, between pleasing and leading in your own life. I wasn't holding the line. I wasn't telling people the hard things. I was trying to keep everyone comfortable around me, and when problems came up, I would hide behind my keyboard and write long, carefully worded emails instead of picking up the phone and negotiating directly. And I told myself, well, I'm being professional, I'm being strategic, but really, I was playing safe. You've held back something you really wanted to say before, haven't you? Know those situations? Well, for me, underneath it all was a question I didn't even realize was running the show. Am I allowed? Am I allowed to push harder? Am I allowed to take up space? Am I allowed to charge more? Am I allowed to lead at this level? You've asked yourself that in some form too, haven't you? That pattern didn't start in business. It started in the world I grew up in a religious environment where women had a very clear role. Be submissive, be small, keep your eyes down, do not challenge men, do not draw attention. And even after I left that world, I saw that conditioning in the world around me, and that conditioning from my past lived in my body. My shoulders would hunch in certain rooms. I would agree quickly, even when I disagreed internally. I would ask for validation before making decisions. And then one day I was sitting in a room with my business mentor, and I was already running a 7-figure company, and I still found myself asking him, is it okay if I implement this certain strategy? And I asked it like a child asking for approval. And he looked me in the eye and said, "You do not need to ask anyone's permission to build your wealth." And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It's hard to explain what that shift felt like unless I take you somewhere from my childhood. So I grew up in a West Coast valley in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with the Southern Alps rising behind our home. And when I was young, my family climbed one of those mountains. I remember standing at the bottom of it and it felt overwhelming. The climb would take hours. My legs would burn. I might slip and fall and injure myself. And from the bottom, that mountain looked intimidating and pretty daunting and enormous. But we made the climb, and the moment I reached the top, everything changed. I stood on the peak looking in awe across rivers winding through the valleys, lakes reflecting in the sky, pastures stretching for miles, and that same mountain that had felt so intimidating from below was now conquered beneath my feet. Nothing about the mountain had changed. My perspective had. And that's what this moment with my mentor felt like. Up until then, I'd been building my business from the bottom of the mountain, looking up, feeling small, asking, am I strong enough? Can I do this? But after that conversation, I made a decision. I would build my business from the top of the mountain. I would stop seeing myself as small in front of the climb and start seeing myself as someone who could already stand at the peak. While I was asking for permission, I wasn't claiming my power. While I was asking and waiting for approval, I wasn't leading. I was trying to upgrade tactics while operating from an identity that kept me small and was trained to keep me that way. And the problem wasn't my skill, it was who I believed myself to be. And in the moments that followed that, my behavior reflected that shift. I stopped hiding behind emails and I started picking up the phone. I negotiated directly. I walked into boardrooms and I pitched clearly. And at 25, I signed one of the biggest ongoing clients in our industry because I was willing to sit at the table with men twice my age and own the solution that my company provided and tell them how we did it better than the companies they were already using. And that deal changed the trajectory of my business. From there on, my personal brand only grew in spades. I made bigger decisions, took bigger risks. I decided I was going to tell my story. I wrote my first book. I landed highly paid magazine features. I appeared in international radio and television. I stepped onto keynote stages. I became a #1 best-selling author. And those results did not come from another course that I took. They came from a decision I made to stop asking and start being. So when you feel stuck, it may not be because you need more knowledge. You keep upgrading skills while operating from the same identity that built your current results. You can see how that's not going to work, can't you? So here are 3 signs that you're still operating from the bottom of the mountain. Number 1 is you pull back when you know you should push forward. You feel it in the moment, that urge to speak up, to say no, to hold the line, to challenge the idea in the room, to go against the grain instead of nodding along. Your body knows. Your body knows before your brain does. There's this tightening in your chest, a thought flashes through your mind, and then you override it. You hesitate, you procrastinate, you soften your tone, you say, yeah, maybe. You tell yourself, oh, well, I'll address that later. You convince yourself that your opinion in the moment is not worth the conflict. That is the bottom of the mountain perspective. From down there, everything feels bigger than you. The room feels bigger, other people feel bigger, the opportunity is bigger. Everyone else is more powerful. And you are smaller. That's how you see yourself. You see yourself as smaller than the mountain and you act like it. So let's be honest about what this is. It's the part of you choosing safety over expansion. And every time you pull back in those small moments, you reinforce the identity of someone who waits instead of someone who leads. The next level version of you doesn't wait for perfect conditions. They do not need unanimous consent and agreement from everyone else in the room. In their business, they say the thing, they name the standard, they hold their ground, not aggressively, not emotionally, just clearly, calmly, strong in their integrity. And here's the big shift for you. The more that you decide that you're already at the top of the mountain, the more your nervous system adapts to that altitude. What once felt bold for you now is normal, and what once felt terrifying is now your new baseline. You don't reach the top by collecting more tools than you can carry. You reach it by refusing to betray yourself in small moments of doubt and by acting as the person who already stands on the peak. Now, the sign number 2 that you're operating from the bottom of the mountain is you give more than you're willing to receive. So when you're operating from a smaller version of yourself, you over-deliver to prove your worth. You discount before anyone even asks for it, and you over-explain so that no one feels uncomfortable around you. You give and give and give. You give access, time, energy, emotional labor, because somewhere underneath it all is the belief that if you are generous enough, helpful enough, impressive enough, then you'll finally deserve to stand at a higher level. The version of you at the top of the mountain who operates from strength does not trade worth for approval. They offer respect and they expect it in return. They hold boundaries without apologizing for them. They state their price without flinching. They do not soften their standards to make other people feel safe and comfortable. Overgiving isn't generosity. It is self-abandonment dressed up as kindness. And this is why this perspective matters. When you see yourself at the bottom of the mountain, you feel like you have to climb by proving yourself every step of the way. When you see yourself at the top of the mountain, you act like someone who already is there, who already belongs there. Your confidence is high. You're not trying to earn your place in the room. You know you belong there. Your shoulders roll back, your spine straightens, your speech slows down. You say less and it carries more weight. You stop overextending yourself to feel worthy. Receiving stops feeling selfish. It starts feeling healthy, inevitable, and balanced. And reason number 3 that you're operating from the bottom of the mountain is that you're waiting for proof before you allow yourself to start, before you allow yourself to rise. You tell yourself, I'll step fully into my power once I have more followers, once I hit a certain amount of revenue, once I've earned that qualification, I can tag that on my name. Once someone bigger validates me, and you say, when I'll get there, then I'll feel ready. But that version of you never arrives because you're asking the future to give you permission to become who you need to be right now. And this is one of the biggest traps for ambitious people. You think confidence comes after evidence. You think that certainty comes after achievement. So you keep working, you keep preparing, you keep stacking credentials, but you're still making decisions from the same place at the bottom of the mountain. You're still hesitating, still waiting to feel ready before you act. Strong leaders do the opposite. They decide first. They believe themselves to have already conquered the mountain before they take the first step. They don't wait for the achievement to prove they belong. They start the climb because they already see themselves at the top. The people you look up to did not wait for the result to come first. They moved, they took the action, and the result followed. They spoke before they quite felt fully ready. They positioned themselves before the numbers quite caught up. They prepared their business for what was going to happen. They acted as if they belonged at that level long before the evidence reflected it. And here's the shift. From the bottom, you look up at the peak and think, when I get there, then I'll feel strong. But from the top, you realize that courage to climb came first. The mountain doesn't make you powerful. The decision to climb the mountain does. So at any point today, you can decide which version you make yourself to be and which version of you makes the next move. You can wait for proof, or you can act from the belief you already belong at the level you're aiming for. And when you act from that belief consistently, your nervous system adapts to that. What once felt intimidating becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes your standard. Carl Jung famously said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. So if you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. You are not stuck because you lack skill. You are stuck because you're still building as the version of you who feels smaller than what's in front of you. You are making decisions from the bottom of the mountain. You're making decisions as the version of you who feels smaller than what's in front of you, smaller than the room, smaller than the opportunity, smaller than the standard you secretly know you're capable of holding. The moment you decide to build from the top of the mountain, everything changes, not because the climb disappears, but because you stop seeing yourself as beneath it. You stop asking if you're allowed. You stop waiting to feel ready. You start acting as someone who already belongs in that room and already carries that standard and already knows they can hold that level. And when you move like that through the world, your posture changes. Your voice, your pricing, your boundaries, your relationships. You don't need more tools. You need a different altitude. Decide where you're building from.